but they're very standard Judas Priest, Iron Maiden-ish, but they had this hairy, jeans-covered behemoth going all over, just an amazing, one-of-a-kind bass player at the time. And everybody noticed him. Everybody was like amazed by his bass playing for this pretty generic band. So you could see that his star was rising, and this band wasn't. They weren't bad, they just weren't going anywhere. And then the guys in Metallica saw him soon after.
He was the most extraordinary bass player I've ever seen in my life. It's almost like when he played the bass, he was playing the guitar.
He's the kind of guy that gives you the shirt off his back, and I had a little connection with him because we both like to smoke a little reefer once in a while. Cliff loved to smoke weed, and he didn't care what anybody thought of him. He wore like bell bottoms and stuff even when they weren't in style.
I was living in Oklahoma at the time, and I saw them play a little club in 1986 as I could, during the Master of Puppets tour. I was right in front, and I was 16 at the time, or maybe 15. And Cliff Burton was right in front of me. I mean, I was like touching his bell bottoms. And he drank half of a beer, and he handed me the rest of it. And I still have that cup to this day.
Back then, I used to play in a band called Blind Illusion, and we were doing a show at the famous Ruby's Inn. And we'd kind of messed around in the studio, you know, with Am I Evil for fun. And we thought, well, it'd be cool if we could get Cliff or somebody to play with us, you know, just for that song. Maybe we could do it, you know. And called Cliff up and said, hey, you know, we're playing tomorrow night at Ruthie's, and we want to play Am I Evil? You know, would you want to come up and jam with us? And he was like, sure, no problem. And so the next night it's like, okay. And we're getting ready to play the song, and he walks up on stage, and I'll never forget it, man. He gets up there, he puts his foot on the monitor, swings his head down, hair's coming down, this fire hair. He swings it back and looks over at the drummer to, you know, to signal the cue for the song. And it was just awesome.
Hi, welcome to San Francisco, the home of Metallica.
And I still remember the day we met.
The San Francisco metal scene became electric in the 80s, not only seeing the spawning of Metallica, but also Exodus, Testament and Heathen.
Let's see, the Bay Area metal scene was pretty quiet in 1980. There was like Y&T and maybe a few other small bands. By 81, there was Metal Mondays at the old Waldorf, and those got more and more famous every Monday. Motley Crue played, and you know, all the cheesy bands played, but heavier and heavier bands started showing up to these things. And Metallica heard about it, and they started playing at the old Waldorf, where the Metal Mondays were. And we all used to trade tapes of the rarest bands we could find all over to England, to New York, to, I guess, to Denmark, or wherever Lars was living, Newport Beach. And so me and Brian Slagle or various other people in 80, 81, before we started our magazines, were, you know, everybody was trading all these amazing bands. And I think that inspired Brian to start his magazine before he started Metal Blade Records.
Yeah, I mean, the Bay Area metal scene was legendary. I know Europe, you know, used to just think, you know, the Bay Area was a place to be. I learned that the Bay Area was a place to be. It was a very exciting time, you know, when Metallica first came up here, then spawned all these other bands doing this new thing called thrash metal.
When you went to a show here in San Francisco, I think the Pit is what it was called and is called today, and it goes round in a circle, round and round and round. Anything goes when you're in that pit. You could get hit, punched, anything can happen to you. So it's quite dangerous at the time to even be at a show sometimes. It was like you're at war. At any given moment, you could be hit from behind.
Finally, the young bands that were coming up, trying to get into the clubs, the clubs were finally opening their doors, and that started really with the Metal Monday, which was sponsored by this radio station out here, KRQR, and that was with Bill Graham Presents. And it was really a way for new bands to come out. I remember in my band trying to get a gig before this all started. The Keystones were all around. There was 3 Keystones clubs.
There was the Stone, there was the Keystone, the Berkeley Stone, and then there was the Omni, the Mabuhay, which is traditionally a punk club. The on Broadway, Broadway in San Francisco was sort of the epicenter of San Francisco metal at the time, and all these bands, great bands, come up. Most notably Exodus, and then there was Death Angel, there was Heathen, and I learned really quick. Motley Crue was not tolerated in that scene. I mean, like Exodus. Like if you went to an Exodus show, like in '84, wearing a Motley Crue shirt, you would got the crap beat out of you.
Did see Metallica was right here. This is the backstage door behind me of the old Waldorf, which used to have a metal night called Metal Mondays. And that's where I first saw them, and they weren't the reason that I came to the concert to see them. I came to see Law's Rocket, another band from back in that era. And from that night on, they captured me.
Metallica was a very determined band that wasn't going to let anything stand. Broken strings, broken drumsticks, amps going out on, which most of the time they would borrow stuff from everybody. I used to lend Metallica gear all the time in the early days.
One thing that helped set them apart from all the other bands is that they were incredibly fast, and they would get really, really drunk before they played. They were known as a young metal attack, and they just had a lot more aggression than most of the bands back then.
The most stunning shows I saw were the first 2 in March of '83 at the Stone with Cliff and with Dave, and it just happened to be a passing of ships. Those were the few they played together, and Dave had this amazing charisma. Cliff had this amazing charisma. James had this amazing charisma. Lars was hilarious on drums. So the 4 of them, that was the best I thought it would ever be.
It was just electric. It was electric what they were doing. And I remember just watching James, and it was almost like he was possessed. And it was with Dave Mustaine, and and it was like, whoa. I mean, I remember seeing them and thinking, these guys, they're gonna go.
It's 7:49 in the morning, and you have ESP because we're going to play Diamond Head, and then we're going to play more Iron Maiden.
I live for you.
We love you, baby.
You too.
Bye-bye.
With the lack of media around the metal scene, Ron Quintana started up Metal Mania magazine. He remembers discussing with Lars some possible titles.
Me and Lars I was doing a magazine and laying out names. And Lars actually had a bunch of names. He was going to name his band, like Red Vet, Blitz crap or something. He had the worst, most generic, Americanized, like car names and the hot rod names, Trans Am names. And I had a list of names like Metal Death, Skull Orchard, and Metallica was in there. And he goes, oh, that's a cool name. What are you going to call your magazine? How about Metal Mania? That was one on my list, too. And so I ended up doing Metal Mania in '81. And a few months later, I heard about this band Metallica.